Brazilians are starting to learn the details about one of the country's biggest cases of a corporate collapse ever. And it might very well be one of the country's biggest corporate fraud cases, too. My name is Gustavo Ribeiro. I'm the editor in chief of the Brazilian Report, and this is Brazil This Week. This week, I'm joined by Fabiane Ziolla Menezes. She is deputy editor of the Brazilian Report and our chief finance correspondent. Fabi, how are you? Glad to have you with us.
Yes, I'm great, Gustavo.
So, Fabi, I'll try to sum up the case of Americanas, this massive, floundering retailer that we have in Brazil, and then I'm going to ask you to delve into the details. So, this week, the controller of Americanas, which is a major retailer trying to claw its way out of one of Brazil's biggest bankruptcy protection programs ever, essentially admitted that for years its executives engaged in fraud. And this is a company that, according to a bankruptcy court in Rio de Janeiro, represents a systemic risk for the Brazilian economy as a whole. So before we go into why the Americanas case is so important, I'd like to ask you a little bit, what is Americanas? For our foreign audience, can you tell us a little bit about the history of this company and why it is so important for the Brazilian economy?
Yes, so until last year, Americanas was the fifth largest retailer in the country and was also among the 10 most valuable companies here in Brazil. At the beginning of this year, already with this scandal in course, Americanas, I think that the position among the most valuable brands, it fell for like the 19th position or something like that. But for years, it was among the 10 most valuable companies here in Brazil.
But even when it's bad, being among the top 20 is pretty big, right? It shows like how big Americanas is.
Yes, already. And the thing is, it's also one of the most traditional brands here in Brazil. It has almost a century of existence. The company was founded in 1929 by three Americans. That's why the name, right? The Americanas. And they opened a street store, a brick and mortar store in Niterói, Rio de Janeiro, at the time, with the idea of selling items, utility items, below, I think it was 2,000 reais, which was the currency at the time. The idea was to sell general utility items for a single cheap price. And I think that the idea of having a wide range of things, it kind of continued throughout the story of the company. And I mean, I think that till the third quarter of the last year, which is the last official data that we have, the last earning reports that the company has released, Americanas had over 1,000 stores in Brazil. And I mean, all the capitals in Brazil has several stores. And I mean, it's really a traditional brand. It's a brand that it's present in the everyday life of every Brazilian. And on top of the stores, the physical stores, Americanas also had a huge e-commerce operation too. So that's it. It's one of the most traditional brands in Brazil, the largest company in Brazil that now is in the focus, and it's one of the biggest scandals, corporate scandals here in Brazil.
So you mentioned that the last available data about Americanas comes from the third quarter of last year. But we now know that this data might not be reliable, right? Because in January, Americanas reported accounting inconsistencies, which turned out to be a much bigger problem in a very deep hole of corporate fraud, of fake contracts. So, can you tell us a little bit about the timeline of this Americanas crisis?
Yes, I will try to sum it up because there were many developments since then. But on January 11, so right in the beginning of this year, the company released a securities filing saying it found 22 billion reais, which is $4.5 billion, accounting inconsistencies, in accounting inconsistencies. At the time, the company explained that these inconsistencies were linked to what the market called forfeit debts. Forfeiting is a financial operation widely used by exports and retailers to boost purchases of goods. So in these operations, the company requests banks to pay its suppliers. Next, the company would have to pay the bank back with interests. The problem with Americanas was that these operations, these debts, were not correctly described in balance sheets. They entered the company's books as a supplier's account, not as financial debt. Well, this is what was explained at the time of the announcement in January, along with the resignation of the company's new CEO, Sergio Rial, who did not last even a month in office. Roughly a week later of this announcement about accounting inconsistencies, the company filed for bankruptcy protection and admitted over 40 billion in debts, in short-term liabilities. And I mean, since the first announcement, the banks, which are Americanas' main creditors, now it had been openly calling the case a fraud. And well, we learned this week they were right.
No, and I mean, it is an interesting case because at the same time that, I mean, it's easy to say, well, this corporate was engaged in fraud, so bring the hammer down. A bankruptcy judge in Rio de Janeiro said that the collapse, if Americana goes under, it could lead to a collapse in Brazil's supply chains with considerable losses to relevant economic sectors, and it would affect over 50 million consumers and put at risk about 45,000 jobs, which, I mean, it's a lot. So that's also one of the reasons why we are covering this up close, because of the major systemic issue that it brings to the economy. There were several economists that said that an Americana collapse could push Brazil into a recession, despite a very stellar Q1 GDP report. Now, you said that banks and creditors of Americanas, from day one, they accused the shareholders and the executives of fraud. They were not wrong, right?
No, they weren't. And we learned that this week. So early this week, the company released a statement to the market with what it called a preliminary result of an independent investigation. It's not the whole report yet, but it's a preliminary result saying that there was really a fraud, and that this fraud was conducted by the former board of directors, so the former CEO, Miguel Gutierrez, and other executive directors, and over a long period of time. The company didn't detail exactly the extent of this fraud, like since when when it started, but said that it was for a long period of time. And also the financial gap that in January was about nearly 22 billion, is actually a little bit bigger than that, than estimated before. It's almost 26 billion reais. Again, almost $5 billion. It's huge, and also this preliminary report that the company released, it said that beyond the wrongly reported forfeit debts that we already explained, and that accounted for roughly 18 billion of this 26 billion financial gap. Americanas' previous leadership also allegedly used several instruments that are typical for retail, like advertising contracts, for example, to artificially reduce the operational costs in the company's books. In the end, they say that in the very, I think, smooth language, but in the end, these contracts were empty contracts.
Mm-hmm.
They either because they either were made up or overpriced, or because their suppliers did not exist. So it was a fraud. Plain and simply, it was a fraud.
Now, Fabi, before we continue with this case of Americanas, I'd like to ask our viewers to subscribe to the Brazilian Report, which is the journalistic engine behind all the content we do, from podcasts to these live broadcasts to our weekly videos as well. You can go to Brazilian.report/subscribe, and we have multiple membership tiers. One of them will certainly fit your budget and your needs. We have from $3.90, and that's really much less than what you would pay for coffee on the Starbucks, and much healthier, I would say, as well. You can also, if you're already a subscriber of the Brazilian Report, you can also, speaking of Starbucks, you can also tip us a cup of coffee every now and then, or become a member of our Buy Me a Coffee fan page, and that would give you also exclusive content on behind the scenes, how we do our journalism, how we manage to harvest award and award nominations after award nominations. We have just last week been selected for 5 categories of the DigiDay Media Awards. So we're waiting for those results, which should come next week. And we can only do that because of the support of our loyal readers. So you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian Report, or just flash that QR code that you see on the bottom right corner of your screen. Go to Brazilian.report/subscribe or buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian Report. So Fabi, you were talking about fraud, and this was this material fact that Americanas sent to the markets was pretty damaging. But I would argue that what happened hours later was even more damaging, because the current CEO of Americanas appeared before Congress. Congress is, of course, conducting a hearings committee on the Americanas case. So the CEO, Leonardo Coelho Pereira, goes to talk to lawmakers, and he actually says, okay, the C-level executives that were in Americanas, they were pretty much all engaged in fraud. They even had a WhatsApp group to arrange how they would doctor the company's books. And remember, this is a publicly traded company, so it is a crime to do that. And he also throws shade at banks who audited the company's books, and of course, auditing giants such as KPMG and PwC, the banks being Itaú and Santander, saying that everyone was involved in either glossing over the reports so the executives would not have to report poor results to the board of executives, the board of directors. What did you make of that statement that the CEO gave to Congress?
Well, I think that there are two things. The first one is that we don't know how much damage these statements uh, can bring to the negotiation, right, between the company and their creditors. Now, we have this ongoing negotiation regarding the company recovery plan, judicial plan. And I think that the last proposition involved capital injection of at least 11 billion reais from the reference shareholders, the principal shareholders of the company, and other financial instruments to to negotiate the debts with the creditors and everything else. So we don't know how much damage these statements can make in this negotiation, which is crucial for the company to survive and to pay their over 40,000 employees and everything. And that the second thing is that there was a narrative in these statements, which were Leonardo Coelho talk to the congressman and say, well, this report that the company is elaborating through an independent investigation, this report documents the fraud, but the transactions known as forfeit debts and the other financial transactions that are under suspicion, he said that they were not seen. They had not been seen by the board members. So there is this narrative that sort of places the blame on the shoulders of the company's former chief executives and directors, and shifts it away from the board members, including the major shareholders of 3G Capital.
Of course, we never seen that happen, right? The owners of the money saying, "Well, we didn't know. Nobody told us about the wrongdoing." That's a new thing.
And I mean, we still don't know how much of this will, hold up, because I think that their reputation is already damaged. But anyway,
their reputation is damaged. But if I may interrupt you, Forbes released its list of billionaires last week. While their reputations is dented, their fortunes barely suffered from that.
Yes,
like the three major shareholders, they lost something about like 0.2% of their fortunes over the past year. So, I mean, I let you imagine what it is to lose billions and just lose 0.2% of your wealth.
Yeah. And I mean, to go through with the negotiation with the creditors, they would have to put another at least 11 billion reais in the company. So, I mean, let's see what happens. But what I was saying is that there are many investigation fronts besides the independent investigation of the company, and besides the Congressional Inquiry Commission. There are many processes in the Security Exchange Commission, the CVM here in Brazil. I think that one or two of them are directly focused on fraud. I mean, is there a fraud or not? Besides that, we have the Prosecution Office of Rio de Janeiro also investigating the former directors.
So these are criminal investigations as well, right?
Yeah, there is a criminal investigation. And on top of that, there are legal actions of 4 of the creditor banks against Americanas, which are focused on gathering evidence, anticipating production of evidence against Americanas. So many investigation fronts. I think that we are still going to discover many ramifications of this scandal in the following months, not weeks, months, I think. And well, we will see. I think that for the consumers, it's a little bit sad because, as I said before at the beginning of our conversation, it is a truly traditional brand. Every Brazilian, I think, used to trust in this brand. And there is also some damage to the reputation of the company, of the company, of the main shareholders. We don't know yet how, if, or how Americanas will come out of this scandal.
And of course, we will be following how this case will evolve, especially Fabi, who is going to be up close with this case. Fabi, thank you very much, and hope to have you soon. And I mean, hopefully with better news on the Brazilian economy, I expect.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And once again, everyone who is watching, thanks for bearing with us. And please go to Brazilian.report/subscribe. You can choose one of our membership tiers. We have a subscription-based business model. So if you believe in independent journalism, that's the best way to support us. If you have already done that, then go to buymeacoffee.com. You can flash that QR code right next to Fabi and choose one of the membership tiers of our fan page on Buy Me a Coffee and get all sorts of exclusive content on Brazilian culture and also on how our company conducts its businesses. I think a lot of the lack of trust in the press is because people don't know how companies do what they do, and we want to be as open as possible. So you can go and you can see how we do our journalism. So Fabi, thank you again. See you next time, and thanks for everyone who stayed with us this week. Ciao.